We're going to give everyone a couple of more minutes before we get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, The Emotion of Design. My name is Bonnie Chase, and I'm on the product marketing team here at Coveo, and I'll be your host today. So I'm so excited to be joined by today's guest. First, I want to welcome Don Norman. Don is a leader in the application of human-centered design and the author of several books, including Design of Everyday Things and Emotional Design. So Don, thank you for joining us today. Also joining us to facilitate this conversation is Bill O'Neill. And as strategist and design leader, Bill has helped shape hundreds of digital experiences, including websites, communities, and apps. Just to go over the agenda for today, we're going to start out, I'll be kind of framing up the conversation and giving some context for our discussion today. Then Bill will lead the Q&A with Don, and then at the end, we'll take some audience questions. I will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. So if you have any questions that come up during the discussion, feel free to enter them into the chat. I will either bring them up into the conversation as relevant, or we can take the rest of the questions at the end of the call. All right, so let's get started. The topic for today is emotion and design. And, I wanted to take a step back by looking at what has transpired over the last year and how that has impacted the way that businesses have interacted with customers. With COVID and, people working from home, what businesses have found is that there is this need to have a rapid digital transformation. So we've been seeing that, for the past few years, companies have been wanting to provide their services online, giving more engagement options for their customers. But, with COVID, it was forced to really be very rapid. And so when undergoing a rapid transformation like that, it can be very easy for companies to start thinking about how technology can help solve those problems. But today we really wanted to take a step back and look at the human element that is often overlooked, and which is emotion. Now, what we've seen, when we look at the data, there's a stat that 41% of companies make investments in digital transformation without the guidance of thorough customer research. And this isn't a surprise to me because what I see, and what Bill sees, in the work that he's doing is that these companies are struggling now. So they roll out all of these different technologies. Maybe there are multiple digital touch points that a customer will have to jump through to engage with that customer. And because that experience and that the emotions behind that weren't thought through, the experience isn't that successful. So companies are struggling with adoption, customer engagement, and really that overall experience that's what should bring the customer coming back. We also see that consumers who have an emotional connection with a brand have a 306% higher lifetime value. And this is really what that experience is about, right? It's not just about being able to complete the task at hand, but it's in the way that we're completing it, with ease, with delight. That's what keeps customers coming back for more. And so really, I'll close my opening with a quote by Don. Emotion is a necessary part of life, affecting how you feel, how you behave, and how you think. And this is really why we thought this conversation was important today. As we're undergoing this change and heading into the new normal, it's really important to make sure that we're taking this into consideration. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and Bill, I'll hand over to you to go ahead and begin the discussion.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. And Don, it's just a pleasure to be with you today. I interview a lot of designers, and maybe it's no surprise that a lot of them bring up that your books or perhaps a speech you gave was the pivotal point in them in focusing on a design career. And it's really impressive. So I'm thrilled to be talking together with you today.
Thank you.
What I've always loved about your approach is how you kind of distill things down for us, helping us think about taking problems down and drilling down to their root cause, or understanding why everyday things, is distilling down what the essence is that we prefer one thing versus another. I'm guessing that a lot of folks on the call are familiar with your work around human-centric design, but I was wondering if you could explain for everyone what the emotion of design is.
People often think that emotion is, in the modern society, we're very logical and sensible and rational. We don't deal with emotion. Emotion is sort of a relic, they think, a relic of our, genetic history. That's wrong. There are two different components of how we behave. One of them is emotion, and the other is cognition. And cognition is where we think it through, we have rational reasons, et cetera, et cetera. Emotion is mostly subconscious, but cognition is sort of explaining, whereas emotion is judging. Emotion determines whether what you're doing is safe or dangerous, good or bad. And the two work hand in hand. And moreover, emotion usually trumps cognition. Emotion, first of all, there are multiple kinds of emotions, and if we may get to that later on. For simplification for designers, I classify it as 3 levels. But the first 2 levels are faster than the cognitive level. So your emotional state is there almost immediately. And you decide whether you like something or not. And then quite often what the cognitive state does is makes up a rationalization for why you're liking what you like. How many times have you decided what it is you would like to buy? You've done a lot of research on, I don't know, a refrigerator or an automobile or a new couch for your living room. And then you go into the store and you look around and you end up buying something completely different. Well, that's the emotional state. Quite often you fall in love with something. You fall in love with the physical form or the appearance, or maybe even how it works. You might sit on the couch and, wow, hey, this is really comfortable. Or you might try to use things. You might drive the automobile. It drives so nicely, but in automobiles, actually the outside appearance really, really matters a lot. It's amazing because it's really not important in many ways functionally. Cognitively, you can dismiss that. No, I hardly ever see the outside. I see the inside, but you fall in love with it. Fall in love, that's an emotion. So they're really important to consider. And when you're talking about customer experience and keeping a customer going. So let me give you an example, and then I'll turn it back to Bill. I had this experience recently. My wife and I moved into a new home, and we were the first occupants of the home, and we really loved it. We loved where we are. I'm sitting in it right now. But I woke up, we spent the evening, and then I woke up in the morning to take my shower, and there was no hot water. And so I called up basically the contractor who had worked on the home, and I said, there's no hot water. And I was really upset. But what happened afterwards was that the results were remarkable. Suddenly about 4 people appeared on my door and tried to fix the hot water. And we have a new kind of hot water heater. I'd never heard of it. It's a heat pump hot water. Heat pumps are often used for air conditioning and heating, but I've never heard of it for hot water. So it's a heat pump plus an electrical heater in case you need it. And so it's fairly complex. And so they couldn't figure out the problem, and they kept working on it and working on it. And they offered me other homes I could go and use their shower if I wanted to. And they kept calling it all the time. They kept apologizing. And then at night, when I still didn't have hot water, at 10 p.m., their electrician showed up. And he was apologetic, even though he didn't even work for the country. He was just called in. And he went in and did all sorts of measurements and said, everything's right, everything's correct. We don't understand it. And so what happened was the next day, they decided the only way to fix it was to replace it, and it would take a long time to get a replacement one. So they found another home that wasn't occupied, and they took the hot water heater out of that home and put it into my home and installed it. Well, the point is this. The fact that I had a problem should have made me really annoyed, but the way in which they responded to it made me like them more than I could possibly imagine. And there is a marketing belief. It's not completely well backed up by data, but I believe it. If a customer buys your product and it works perfectly and they're really happy, that's customer A. Customer B buys your product and it doesn't work and they're unhappy. So they complain to you, either the store or the manufacturer, and you go out of your way to make them, to compensate for the problem and to fix it for them. That's customer B. You test them later on, customer B likes the product and likes the company better than customer A. So think about that. Is that rational? No, you should be like the person who had no trouble should like it better. But that's the power of emotion.
Yeah, and we often see, you know, especially in support cases. So if customers are submitting issues and tickets and engaging with support, they're more likely to renew than a customer who's not engaging at all. So that's interesting.
Well, let me talk about that. So many companies think of support as a cost center, and therefore they're doing their best to reduce the amount of time that the supporting staff spends with the customer. And oftentimes they try to find the cheapest supporting staff. You go off to India or Indonesia or China or someplace where they can speak, well, English, or in your case, Portuguese, and use often badly. And they have scripts that they follow and they don't really know what's going on, but they're saying the company is saving money. No, the company is not saving money. First of all, quite often the customer leaves not only unhappy, but without the problem resolved. So they call back again and again and again and again. And in fact, you should think of this as a positive opportunity to engage the customer, to make them happy. And while you're at it, you might even upsell. You might be able to get them to buy other stuff. And if you reverse it, you can change the entire emotional interaction and their view of the company. And in fact, in the end, if you do the accounting properly, the service line is no longer a cost sink. It's an income generator. The only problem is that the income might come a few months later, but it will lead to increased sales and increased satisfaction.
I think that's a great point. We've seen similar things with some of our clients, is that some of them may see it as a cost. There was one client that we evaluated some of the folks on their support community and found out that the people that were registered only represented a small segment of their customers. They were scared that they were giving information away to competitors or whatever. And as we dug a little bit deeper, we found that their prospects were out there. The leads that they were already talking to were out there. Their partners were out there. And so the bulk of the people that were there, their entire ecosystem, it wasn't just a support channel. It was everyone trying to get access to information, pre-sales information, things like that, just trying to learn about the brand before they made some decisions. And even an empowerment tool for partners. So it's interesting to think beyond just, it just doesn't serve one use case. It serves a broad set of use cases.
One of my important design principles is that everything is a system. And if you simply work on the one thing you've been assigned to, you're not going to do a great job. To do a great job, you have to recognize all the other things that are impacted.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things I was thinking about before today was, how much digital has evolved. You've been talking about the motion of design for a while, and as I think about the early days of the web, we were focused on things like visits. We were lucky to get, hey, we got another visit on our website today, another 100 visits. And today the complexity has really changed. Now we're focused more on engagement. People spend a big bulk of their day in some kind of digital experience, whether that's a branded community or a mobile app, or a web-enabled business application. And I was wondering if you'd thought about how the motion of design changed, with our more pervasive experience that we're having on the digital experience. As you're thinking about the emotion of design changed at all?
My thinking has not changed at all, but the way it's being done today is mostly wrong. And for example, you count how many hits or how many visits your website has. That's completely irrelevant. You want to know how many people buy your stuff or take advantage of whatever you're offering. That's what matters. And so actually, I'm writing a new book to talk about the way things have changed and the way I believe that we need to change ourselves. But one of them has to do with measurement. There's this belief that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Well, that's probably true. But what do we measure? We almost never measure what really matters. We measure what's easy to measure instead of the real thing. So what's easy to measure is how many clicks did people make, or how many times did people visit? But what we really need to measure is, as you said, Bill, engagement. How happy were they? How satisfied were they? Are they going to come back? And more important, depending upon the nature of your business, are they going to purchase your services or your goods? And that last one is those. First of all, engagement is hard to measure. You can measure time, but that doesn't tell you. I might spend a half hour because I'm being frustrated and I'm really annoyed because I can't find what I'm looking for. So how much time I've spent is not a good measure. But how do you get a good measure when you're a distance from a person? Look, I'm talking to, it says here, 68 people. And actually 65, if you just don't count the 3 of us, 4 of us. But how do I know if they like what I'm saying? I get no feedback. I have no idea whether what I'm saying is the right thing for them. I might be saying wonderful things, but if it's not relevant to the audience, who cares? And I don't have any feedback on that. So how do we measure what really matters? That's what's important. So what I believe in, I don't like questionnaires. I don't like surveys. I don't like focus groups, because focus groups, well, probably all of you know how biased they are. And the way I like to point out surveys and questionnaires is, how many times have you been happy with a questionnaire or survey you were sent? Do you trust your own answers? No, I don't trust my own answers, because you asked me a question and then none of the answers that you gave me as a choice were the ones that I believe in. So I couldn't answer what I really thought. On top of that, what I think is not necessarily how I behave, because I think I behave rationally and sensibly, etc. But no, that's not actually how I behave. We've already mentioned that. So what I believe in is observation. And so that's why design researchers are trained in going in to watch real customers doing their everyday jobs. You might want to spend a day with them, because the first hour doesn't count, because the first hour they're so sensitive that you're there watching and observing that they're not going to behave normally. So you have to spend some time with them, and you don't ask them what they're doing, just watch. Now, what you can do is break periodically and then go back and ask them what they were thinking and what they were doing that you observed. But if you ask them while they're doing it, they'll change what they're doing. So you have to watch and then come back. And this is a way, it's very qualitative. You're getting opinions, but you're getting trained investigators who are trying to record what happened. And it really helps if they video it, get permission to video it, so that the designers and the actually executives in the company can see the videos, sample videos of what is really taking place. And it's amazing what you learn from that.
It's really interesting. I was thinking too, a comment that Bonnie had earlier about customer support communities and people coming into an inherently negative experience, that they've got a problem they've been trying to solve, a frustration that they have, and then they come in with this emotionally charged negativity into maybe a support question or looking for support. How should we think about maybe approaching the emotional design of something that already kind of starts off on a negative foot?
Well, first of all, the designers, the engineers, executives ought to be required to spend considerable time listening to those support lines, observing and watching and listening. Understand what your customers are complaining about. It's amazing how many people don't do that. They let it to the service lines, and the service lines maybe writes a report. That's not the same as spending time listening to people. So when I worked at Apple, I did that. I went and I listened to the customers coming in over the support lines, and I went back and tried to tell the engineers what the issues were. And it was amazing that they didn't want to go listen to the support lines. And or their managers didn't want to give them the time to spend a few hours every week listening to support lines. And it took me a big fight to convince people. And I was a vice president, but I still didn't have any power over the other divisions. It took a lot of time to get people to actually say that that's an important source of information. And because there's another problem is that people tend to think that, oh, the people complaining there's something the matter with them. How come they can't use our product? Or why are they having trouble? Well, it doesn't matter if there's something the matter with them. They're your customer. And on top of that, most of the time, it isn't something the matter with them. It's something the matter with your product. So you have to, in other words, to get this to work, not only does the design community have to really get in touch with those customers and watch and observe, but so do the engineers, and so do the executives, and so do the salespeople, and so do the marketing people.
It's funny. One of the things sometimes I see with communities is they're designed really well. They seem very usable and intuitive and emotive experiences, but they still have challenges that you can tell that they focused on designing the look and feel of things, but not the experience. And the example I might give is you come to a support community and you can see that there's a very frustrated or disgruntled post front of the community because they're trying to show you some relevant content, what's the latest from the buzz from the community, but there's no response to that. So that person's frustrated about their product or support experience. You can see based on the post date that maybe it hasn't been responded to in a day or maybe longer. And it reminds me of, kind of your emotive stages that I get reflective. Is this the right place for me to be if this person's not getting a response? Is this the right brand for me if they're letting somebody just kind of linger like this? And I think I've seen some other scenarios where there maybe is a post that says, sorry to hear you're having a problem. Please call me. My name's John. Here's my email or my phone. And that might make me feel a little bit better that that person got some resolution possibly, but it's kind of a neutral state. And I think kind of to your point about the hot water heater, when I see a response where there's a thoughtful thread from another peer in the community or customer support person that says, here's a couple different options for you to think through it. Really a longer dissertation on that and the invitation to contact them. You do more to provide confidence to other people that might see that post. It becomes content for the next customer that might have the same problem. It's more input for search engines that are looking for content like this. And this content could be relevant for customer support representatives that need to have that kind of content too. So to think about the design is really thinking about the whole experience, not just the look and feel and the usability of it, but what's the experience like for somebody visiting the site and the content they can find and discover.
So there's nothing I really can add to what you said, because you said it perfectly. But I will add one thing. What's really important is now that the people on the support line, first of all, show empathy and concern and go overboard to try to help. everything you said. But now afterwards, they should make sure that whatever they've discovered, it goes back into the company. So the company can try to fix the root cause so it doesn't happen again. It doesn't do much good if the same problem happens over and over and over again, and you have sympathetic, empathetic people trying to tell them what to do. No, that's also, you should also then post saying, we have gone back to the whatever kind of company you have, the manufacturers, the designers, the engineers, the support people, who knows, and say, and we've changed it, so this should never happen again. But if it does, please call me. Here's my direct contact.
Outstanding, yes. This makes me think too, one of the challenges sometimes we see is in such a fragmented customer service experience that you might have phone service and online chat and the support community and forums and social media. It's hard sometimes to think about the emotion of design across that cross-channel experience. Have you seen any successful tactics in thinking about that holistic experience, or ways to help us as designers think about how we're integrating with some of those other channels?
It's rare. It's rare. No, I don't believe I've ever seen a response where it's clear they have consulted with other components of the company. But I will say that one of the companies that has pleased me the most is, believe it or not, Amazon. Now, Amazon, I have lots of friends who have worked for Amazon at many different levels, from high-level executive to middle-level people. They're not necessarily happy with Amazon as an employee. But Amazon has always put the customer first. And I've had a number of incredible experiences with them where, well, I had bought a Kindle, for example, for reading. And it was, I think, 10 years old or something, and it wasn't working anymore. And it was way past its expiration date and its warranty date, et cetera. But I just wrote them and told them what my problem was, wondering whether there was an easy way to fix it so it could keep working. And what they did was they just mailed me a new Kindle. What? I wasn't expecting that. I was fully expecting them to say, it's 10 years old, it's past its life cycle, and what the problem that you mentioned is not one that's easily fixed. That's what I expected. I would have been happy with that response. But no, they said, they just mailed me a new Kindle. And I've had other cases where Amazon just goes out of its way, and it doesn't matter if it costs them more money to do all of that. In fact, quite often when if they send me something, and I'm trying to remember what it was, we recently bought something and it was the wrong thing. It was our fault. We shouldn't have ordered that one. We should have ordered a slightly different one. And I went and told them that, and they said, okay, we'll send you the right one. And then they said, don't bother to send the old one back. Because actually they figured out that it cost them more money for me to send it back than it would be just for me to keep it or do whatever I wanted with it. Now that's dangerous, because if people learn that Amazon always takes consumption and gives you, what it is you ask for, they're going to play the system, and people who maybe never even bought the item will ask for it, et cetera, et cetera. But nonetheless, for them, customer satisfaction with Amazon is very, very high. They're really quite good at keeping the customer happy. Now, if only they could learn to keep their employees just as happy.
I like what you touched on with the idea of surprise and delight in the customer support experience, and helping somebody resolve a problem to either oversolve it or provide something additional that was unexpected as a way to create that positive emotive experience that's memorable and create some brand preference for them. So some other things that I've seen is that brands are trying to recognize you a little more across channels. So when you call, they know it's me. It's Bill. Yes, it is. So I don't have to do some of that. So it feels like there's a recognition across the different touch points. There's a bit of, each channel has a specific task that, online I'm doing a certain thing, but maybe on the phone support, it's for a different kind of use case, so that there's that bit of channel specificity in there. But I really like what you had to say about surprise and delight. It's one of the things I think that sets a lot of brands apart with their support experience.
Surprise, delight, and personal contact. So it's really good. When I deal with a company, I don't recognize the fact that a company has many different divisions. I assume that if I talk to I talk to the company, I don't talk to a division. And so when I give them a problem and so on, it's really annoying when they say, oh, I'm sorry, but I'm the wrong person to talk to. I'm going to transfer you over to somebody else. And that somebody else has no idea why I'm there and I have to start all over again. So, but now today, a lot of our digital systems make it possible for the entire interaction to be sent over to the person. And by the way, that happens in medicine too. I see a physician who recommends me to a specialist, who can recommend me to another specialist, and each one starts over again. Well, for today, more and more of the electronic medical records make it possible so that even if I go to a completely different hospital system, that specialist has, oh, my entire history. Well, that's what we need in the world of business as well. But you have to be careful. If I've had this happen, I go to Brazil as an arbitrary example, and I come back and suddenly I notice the advertisements whenever I go to a website to read the news, say, are all about things happening in Brazil and things I should buy or my next trip or where I should stay. And wait a minute, why are you invading my privacy? Why are you doing that? So you have to be careful. You want relevant information, but when suddenly it means that my presence was advertised to the world so everybody can come and attack me or ambush me, no, that isn't pleasant.
I wanted to kind of
Good
add
point.
to what you said. You were talking about Amazon as an example, and interacting with one brand, and it just made me think. When I'm shopping on Amazon or I'm interacting, I don't think about their departments. Amazon is Amazon. That's all it is. And then when you interact with them online, whether you're on the website or the app, it feels like the same company. It's that same experience, and I think that's one of the things that Bill, maybe you were kind of alluding to with your last question, which is, we have these small moments. We have, I'm designing the website or I'm designing the app, but then really thinking about what does that whole experience look like as a person transitions from one to the other, and just keeping that, the same brand, the same company, and how important that is for that user, for that customer.
In fact, Amazon's a good example because on their website, they have this drop-down menu and various things that let you choose which department you want to be in. How do I know? I want to buy a new light for my video so that I'm in light, not in the shade. Where do I look? Electronics, lights, living room? I don't know where I look. But in most companies, if you don't choose the right division, you're screwed. You're not going to find what you want, even though the company has the perfect thing. With Amazon, it doesn't matter where you said you wanted to go or where you wanted to look. If you type in what you're looking for, they'll find it for you. And
Yeah, I think
I'm not even sure why they put in those divisions because I don't need to use them. I could say I'm looking for laundry products, but I really want a book, so I type in the name of the book, and there it is.
so. Don, I was thinking about that. A lot of the folks on the call today are designers, and I'm sure that they're probably excited to champion the emotion of design in their work. But one of the pinch points that we all have is having enough time to think about design, much less the emotional facets of it. I was curious, do you have any ideas about how designers can articulate the business value of exploring the emotion of design in their work to help kind of sell some of these more time through for them?
Well, what a coincidence. I just happened to look at the question and answer, and there it says, what suggestion would you help to convince the benefits of experience design and to implement it holistically to a company who doesn't understand what I do?
Very timely.
And here's what I usually say when I'm asked that question. So how do you try to convince the people you work for about the value of what you do? And usually what designers say, I tell them the kind of work I do, the kind of problems that customers are having, or the kind of issues that I see in the company and how I'm solving them. And I try to tell them the prizes we've won. And I try to tell them the wonderful letters of, congratulations or thanks that we get. And I respond by saying, well, that's interesting, that's nice. Who's your customer? And they'll tell me about the person in the store or the person who's using the stuff and so on. And I'll say, no, that's not your customer. The customer is your boss, or actually the boss of your boss. So that's who you're doing your design for. Yeah, yes, you want the person who eventually ends up with the product or, or the service to be happy, and etc. But your real customer is the person you're working for. And if you're working in a consultancy, well, it's your client. So your job is to get your client or your boss promoted. In other words, you need to understand the language of business. So what matters in your business? Well, let me tell you, I worked at Apple back in the years when we had the best computer system of anybody. And nobody was buying it. Everybody bought Windows. And it doesn't matter how good your product, how many prizes, how wonderful, if no one is buying it. So why wasn't anybody buying it? Well, that's a long story and not for today, but it had to do with, well, different day, unless Bill insists on following up. In business, you're rewarded for being successful. If you're not making a profit, then it doesn't matter how good your company is because you're going out of business. And so you have to understand profitability. You have to understand balance sheets. You have to understand what it means to have, what does the word margin mean? You have to understand the economics of finance, that a dollar that you were, a dollar that you earn 5 years from now is not as valuable as a dollar you earn today. It's called present value of money. Basic finance, very simple, but you have to learn it and you have to appreciate it. You have to recognize, what does it take to get your boss's boss promoted? That boss's boss has to show increased sales and increased profitability of the division. Or if it's a support division, which is as I said earlier, a cost sink. For that matter, so is design a cost sink. For that matter, so is engineering, because none of these people are selling things. They're making it possible to sell. So they have to all justify what they're doing because they're helping the company succeed. And that's what you have to do. You have to learn to talk the language of your company. And where do you learn that? It's interesting. You don't learn it in design school, although you ought to. So you have to learn it by yourself. And the easiest way to learn it is make friends. With your marketing friends, because most marketing people get MBAs often, and the MBA is a degree that teaches you all of this. So have them tutor you. It isn't that hard. It's surprisingly, it's a different mindset, that's all. But unless you understand where you are in the company, what your real role is in the company, you're not going to convince anybody. Now, one more thing. Quite often designers have have an idea to change the product, or they realize people are complaining about the product. Here's what happens. If I've been an executive in a large company, when somebody comes to me and says, let me explain the wonderful things we're doing and the prizes we're doing, I say, yes, that's very nice. Yeah, I'm really pleased that you get all that. But that's why we hired you, of course. But now, thank you very much, but I have to get back to work. So second, if they come to me with a problem saying, well, here's a problem that we're hearing from all of our customers and our people using our stuff, I'm going to say, I don't want to hear about the problems. And it's not because I'm not interested in them. It's not that I'm trying to close my eyes to the problems we have. What I want to hear is the solution. So don't come to your executives with the problems that you see out there. Come to them with what you can do to solve them. And one last thing, if you have a new idea for a product, or even you have a possible solution to the problems you've seen, it's good to show them your examples, and it's good to show them pretty renderings and pictures and diagrams and whatever. But that's not what convinces them. What convinces them is a spreadsheet. You have to show an Excel or Google Sheet, anything, a spreadsheet that shows them, see, increased sales, see, decreased costs, see, increased profitability. And most designers say, oh, well, gee, how do I know what those numbers are? How do I know what the increased sales would be? And I say, well, let's talk about making a physical product. It's easier for this example, but it applies to everything. Uh, we know that lots of times marketing insists that you add this new feature to this product. And you'd say, no, 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 that makes it harder to use. And marketing always wins. And why is it? Because marketing shows the spreadsheet to their bosses. They say, here's the increased sales and increased profits. And by the way, look, here's what the competition is doing. Why don't you do that? Where does marketing get those numbers from? Well, they lie, they make it up. So can't you lie? Can't you make it up just as good as they can? And if you can't do it as good as they can, make friends with the marketing people. They'll help you. Because in theory, you're both on the same side. Marketing cares about sales. You care about satisfying the customers and what they need. Those are two different things, but they're both essential to the company. So you ought to be on the same side. So what it takes is to sell something is different. Sometimes you actually have to downplay some of the virtues of this product to make it more sellable. But accept that, it's important. So the point being, when marketing makes up these numbers, the executives, they know they're made up because they used to make them up too as they were being promoted. So, but what they look at, they look and they say, there's no choice but to make them up. There's no way of getting evidence about what a new thing will do in sales. So they ask themselves, does this make sense? Do the assumptions that are being made here, are those reasonable? Do I believe that this is a reasonable guess about what might happen? So that's how you have to convince your audience. It's a very different way of thinking, but you have to take away your hat as a designer or an experienced architect, whatever you are, because yes, that's what you were hired for. But what you have to do is demonstrate that what you're doing is going to aid the entire company.
And I like how you're calling in the collaboration, Don, because you really can't do it alone, right? And so as you were talking, one of the things that I thought of, as far as, trying to see what's successful with customers and in a different context is, one of the things that I do in marketing is I'm talking to customers, I'm talking to prospects. And if you can collaborate with that person on your team who's doing that, we can ask those questions too. We can help get some of that information because I'm asking things like, well, what content did you see across your journey that was helpful to you? I mean, we can ask things about how did this impact your buying decision, and I think that's very possible. And so working with another team member in the organization, I think is a great way to add to that.
It's not only a great way, it's an essential way.
Mm-hmm.
I blame the schools. We train people in all fields, by the way. The university is about the only place in the world where you have to do your work all by yourself. We train people to do their own thing, their own product design, their own essay, their own whatever, and then we test them on it. That's not how the world works. In fact, I argue that if I'm asked to write a paper in a class and I don't understand the topic, I should ask my friends if they could provide some material for me. And I should copy from the work they've done. And I should go find books and other stuff and copy. Look, if I'm working in a company and my boss says, what is this new kind of satisfaction index? I don't understand it. Would you write a short paper for me to explain it? And I have no idea what the person is talking about. Well, I'm not allowed to say, no, I can't write it. I have to go talk to my friends and I copy. I take this, oh, you wrote that description. That's wonderful. Can I have it? And this, that, and I put it all together. Now, in the university, that's called cheating. But it's not cheating. It's not cheating if you give credit. But because it's not allowed to take from somebody else, we lie about it. We make believe we wrote it ourselves. No, I say, if you borrow somebody else's work, you should say, so-and-so wrote the following. And you give them credit. And maybe if you get a high grade, they should get part of the high grade as well. Because the real skill you have is not that I, in my own head, did this wonderful work. I found all these other people who were doing the wonderful work, and my skill was putting it together in a way that made sense and taught you something. Now, in the company, it's the same thing. You are not you yourself are not the only person working on the problem. You usually have a team. But the problem is the team is almost always people from your own division, whereas the issues go across the company. So you must bring in and take advantage of all of the other experts and make it a multidisciplinary team. And when you do that, it's going to be really hard because you're all going to, each discipline thinks it's the top discipline and the others should listen to it, because everybody thinks that whatever they do is the most important thing in the world or in the company, which is a good way to think, because otherwise, why would you be doing it if you didn't think it was so important? But you have to recognize there are different points of view and you all have things to add and of value. So learning to work collaboratively and take advantage, just as Bonnie was saying, is critically important.
Don, I realize that our time is starting to run out. I have so many questions I'd love to cover with you, but maybe a last one before we kind of open it up to some other audience questions. You know, COVID is on everybody's mind. Bonnie kind of talked about this in the beginning. There's been a big transition as folks realize they need to be more digitally enabled to engage their stakeholders, their customers, their employees, because we're all remote. What are some ways to, emotion's playing a bigger role, obviously, today in all of our lives. It feels like the stakes are higher, I guess, when it comes to some of this stuff. What's your thoughts about how emotion design fits in today versus maybe in our recent past? And is there any considerations for navigating this?
It's very interesting because we were all forced to go online. And it turned out that some things are better. We've learned how to do some things better. Look at this. You could get me to give a talk and I didn't have to travel a great distance. And on top of that, for the now 59 people listening, it's a more personal experience, I suspect, because they're seeing me straight ahead. You know, a big face, as if I'm talking directly to you. And I actually try to do that. I don't look at my face or your face. I look right there at the camera. So it means I'm looking at you and I'm speaking to you in the audience. So it's a more personal interaction. And the kind of discussion we're having really wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And the fact that we have several people asking me questions, but again, I assume your face pops up on the screen and they see it's personal. And when they ask a question, I'll be responding directly to them. And depending upon how you do it, I may even see them specifically ask me the question. So that's one big thing. Second is that we've also learned to do better customer support and other things because of the use of digital techniques. Now, some of the things we do are not nearly as good. You can't do networking. You can't go, out to drink afterwards and become friendly and get to know a different side of the person, which causes an improvement in interaction. So it isn't that everything is better. Some things are worse. But I have a feeling that after this is all over with, we're going to maintain some of these new things. Wouldn't it be nice if the support line was like this? That when I call the support line, instead of an automatic system I'm not even allowed to talk to a person. I have to talk to a bot. And it's really hard to get back to a person because the bot only has certain abilities and doesn't have them all. And when I talk to the person, I don't see the person. But why can't we bring in a little bit of video like this where I'm actually talking to a real human being and it really feels like it? And the emotional state, look, we have 37, a whole bunch of muscles in the face, a lot of which its major purpose is to show my emotional state to you so you know how to react to me. And we miss that if we don't see the face.
It's funny that the video thing that you mentioned, Bank of America is doing the same thing in their lobby. So rather than having a staff there, you can go to a kiosk and have a video conversation like this. So I agree with you. There's some things that are going on today that might become a persistent part of the future for us.
And by the way, and nowadays, you won't even have to go to the bank because if they can do it in their kiosk, they could do it at your home.
Right. One of the things that's been persistent for me is kind of thinking about designing for betterment. Part of our mission at Seven Summits is to help people create, compete, and innovate in new ways. And I just think today, in the current times that we're in, it's never been more essential to kind of think about that and how we're helping people move forward and become more fulfilled in their lives.
Yep.
Well, Bonnie, I'll turn it over to you. Do we have any audience questions?
Let's see here. I do have a question for you, Dawn. So, you mentioned that you're writing a new book and you're thinking about some of these other external things that we should be considering as designers. I'd like to know if you could share just what a few of those things are that we should be that we need to start thinking about, especially today.
Thinking about for what purpose?
Just things beyond like external things, sustainability, maybe ethics, race and design. What do you think are some of those top things that we should be thinking about now?
Yes, the list you gave is actually a very important list, a very difficult list, each one of which is going to, even an hour conversation wouldn't be enough. I am very concerned about sustainability, and one of the problems we're facing is the world doesn't have infinite resources, and we're reaching the limit on some of the resources. And I have been in India, for example, where in the city of Ahmedabad, there's a big trash pile that's burning continually, and it's discarded electronics, and the fire is spontaneous with the degrading of the components, and it emits poisonous fumes, and it's horrible. And it isn't just in Ahmedabad. This is true in many, many countries of the world. And why is that so? Why do we make things that can't be recycled, can't be reused? And one of the reasons is, well, gee, if I take a look at this phone, for example, this happens to be a Google and Pixel, but they're all very similar. You can't really tell them apart when you look at them. Look how thin it is. Isn't that nice? Well, yeah, but making it thin means you had to reduce the size of the components. You had to squeeze everything in. And so we took the cover off the battery to make it thinner. And you can't open it up. It's really hard to open. It requires special tools to open it up. So if your battery goes bad, you have to buy a new one, a new phone. It's very expensive and difficult to replace the battery. And moreover, the battery life is limited. It barely lasts a day. Because it's so thin. If you made it a little bit thicker, a few millimeters thicker, the battery life would be much extended. Battery life goes up as a square of the distance. And second, it's a combination of materials. And when you take a material, let's just take something pleasant that's, a nice piece of wood, but it has a nice piece of leather over it, so it feels good. Well, leather could be recycled, wood could be recycled, but not the fusion of the two. You can't separate the two, and so that has to be thrown away. So much of our material, here's a cup, paper cup I've been drinking coffee out of. I can't recycle it because it's plasticized. It has to be plasticized so the coffee doesn't sink in, but the plastic means that the paper can't be recycled. Why do we make so many things that are so difficult like that? And we are destroying the environment as a result. So that's one thing. And designers, Papernak, as I said earlier, I didn't say to this audience, I said to you privately. People have blamed designers for that, but it's not the designer's fault because designers can only do what the company tells them they must do. So, but designers have a responsibility, though, to educate, not only educate the company, but also to provide alternatives to what they are doing. Sustainability is real, and we are not doing a good job of taking care of it ourselves. The way we treat people is real. Racial imbalance. Race is an artificial concept. It doesn't really exist in the world. And quite often skin color is used as a surrogate for race, but skin color doesn't change the person inside. But we use skin color because it's easy to see. We can distinguish men from women, so we can discriminate against men or against women or treat them differently. And that's also crazy. And this is a really large social problem across the world that has to be changed. Indigenous people, Columbus sailed the ocean from Spain to America, and a new uninhabited land that we can take over. It wasn't uninhabited. It had lots and lots of indigenous people living there with good, powerful societies. But they were called savages, and so savages aren't real people, so we can kill them or move them away or whatever. Or we can enter into agreements with them, but we didn't understand their culture. So in the United States, we reached agreements with the people who were inhabiting the land. Now, Columbus thought he had discovered India, so that's why we called them Indians, even though he didn't go even anywhere near India. But the Indians didn't understand that people owned land. They thought people had hunting rights. So when they signed an agreement with the new settlers, the settlers thought you owned the land and nobody else could use it if you said it was yours. And the Indians thought they had the hunting rights. So nobody else could hunt there, but other people could use the land for other things. But what you got there, and this is typical, a complete lack of understanding. They each thought they were in legitimate, sensible negotiation, but they were talking about different things. That's another problem across the world, is we lack a deep understanding of the cultures. So
Yeah.
yes, there are major issues that we really must address.
Yeah,
By the
no,
way,
Don, one
back
of the
to
things,
back to customer satisfaction. That last issue is really critical. You need to understand the culture of your customers, and even in a single country, you will have multiple cultures. And
Yeah.
one thing that's worse is when you're an international company and you think that the way you design it for one set of cultures in your home country now applies all else. No, it doesn't.
That's good.
Don, one of my
Um,
takeaways from today, especially in the conversation that we had in advance of this, is just the changing role of designers to not focus so much on design, but become broader in understanding business and sustainability and ethics, and being a facilitator of the design experience, not a black box of design, to really bring other people into this process to create a better future for everyone.
It's a system and we're all in this together, and it doesn't work well unless we're all a team, collaborative.
Great.
Absolutely. I think we can take one more question. What do you think the major considerations are for emotional design as it pertains to AI and the intersection with human interaction?
Well, as a former researcher in AI, in what is today called good old-fashioned AI, but not only that, but in my office and next door to me in my laboratory, we invented the neural network, which is one of the really themes of today. And one of my postdoctoral fellows not only helped invent the neural net, but he then went on later on to invent what's called deep learning. Actually, he didn't invent deep learning. I asked him, I said, so what is the real breakthrough that allowed deep learning? And he said nothing, except that today computers are immensely, somebody told me 1 trillion, I don't believe it, but 1,000 to 1,000,000 times more powerful than they were earlier. And that's what enables it. But the problem is that AI is soulless. It doesn't know anything about emotions, doesn't know anything about people. It simply knows it's basically pattern recognition. Machine learning is pattern recognition. And it's soulless and emotionless, and it makes errors because it's subject to the same biases as humans are, except because it's done by a machine, we don't recognize that they are biases. So we need to bring in the human side of the use of this technology. I don't want to blame the technologists, they're doing a good job, but I do blame the people who apply the technology and who overstate its power, because it is powerful, it is wonderful. A good example is machine translation, which has become really quite good. It often misses the point, doesn't fully understand, but it's remarkably good. And just a few years ago, it was remarkably bad. But it has to be just another tool that we engage as we put together our interactions, say, with our customers. And AI can be valuable, but that doesn't mean that you should always follow it or trust it. And it's not that it's untrustworthy, it's that it's incomplete. It doesn't have any understanding, no understanding. It's pattern recognition. It recognizes this pattern and here's what I think. But that isn't understanding. So we have to recognize the weaknesses of AI, and then we can use it to our good. And there's a longer story that goes along with this, but that's the major point. And then there are actually a big movement. A lot of people now do recognize the problems and the ailments and the evil, if you will, that AI is causing when it's used inappropriately. And so lots of people in the AI community itself are talking about humane AI and AI for the good and so on.
Well,
Certainly, we're seeing some of that in some of the platforms that we work with as they're becoming smarter platforms. And some of the design considerations that we're thinking about is making sure that we're continuing to start with the user, not taking the technology feature and saying, where can we apply this? But starting with the users and what they're trying to accomplish, and then see where maybe technology can lend a hand. It's important to know what to automate. We can't take users out of feeling in control or involved in the experience by automating too many different things. I think we have to differentiate what's intelligent content and explain how machines think. Amazon does a little bit of that today by saying, here's some recommendations on how we provided these to you. That kind of transparency is really important if you're thinking about embedding that into your own solutions, and provide the ability to give feedback. To Don's point, this is machines are learning, and if we don't give them a chance to get some feedback on that, they can improve about it in the recommendations that they're providing. So those are some of the things that we've been thinking about as we're trying to bring solutions to life too.
Yes. So
Yeah.
actually giving recommendations, which a number of systems now do, is really excellent because it doesn't force yourself upon me, but it says, you watch this movie. Well, here's one that people who like the kind of movies you like also like, and I can look at it or ignore it.
Right.
It doesn't thrust itself in my face. But here's another example that happened to me. I discovered, it's because I moved, so I'm putting up all my books. I discovered I don't have a copy of my first major textbook, Human Information Processing. And so I went and I searched and I found a used bookstore that had a copy. And so I ordered it. And then lo and behold, I'm now getting all these letters from them saying, would you like to know more books by the author Donald Norman? Well, no, thank you very much. I think I know them all. But that's what happens when you use artificial intelligence. It seems like a sensible thing. If I bought a book by an author and I've never bought one from that author before, then I must really want to see other books by that same author. But my name was on the order slip. They could have sort of checked.
Yeah, no, these are good examples, and I love the discussion that we had today. So thank you, Bill and Don. We are out of time, but really appreciate you taking the time to join us in this conversation. We'll follow up with any remaining questions, and so thank you all for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.
And thank everybody.
Everyone, thank you, Don.
For staying with it. And thank you, Bill and Bonnie.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.